Judy here from the Quilting Bee in Maslin, Ohio, and I am home in my inner sanctum with the final step of my crazy quilt. If you remember, or if you happen to watch the video on the beginnings of this crazy quilt, which I loved doing, I had such a good time with this. I knew I was going to have an issue when it came to joining my blocks because it really ended up being a quilt as you go. And as you can imagine, joining two quilt as you go blocks is going to give you a really bulky seam. So I searched around and came up with a process where you use sashing to join the blocks, so that in essence what your blocks end up doing is just abutting each other. You don't have a seam of the double thickness. So that's what this is about, and this is the final of this crazy quilt series, putting it together. So here we go. So it's really fairly simple. All you need, let me get my little iron out of the way here, is a couple of strips of your sashing. I had planned on doing this while I was doing my quilt, but it ended up being a lot of black, and black it is not easy to see black. So I came up with just a couple little samples here that we can pretend with. So what I have is one strip of sashing that is the length of my block, and in mine is 7 inches. So it's 1 inch by 7 inches. And then another piece of my sashing that started out as 2 inches by 7, and all I have done is pressed it together, doubled it. So I've ended up with 2 strips that are 7 inches by 1 inch. And what I'm going to do is take my first block, and with my piece that is this single 1 inch, with the right side up, and I'm using muslin, so it's a little difficult to tell, but right side up, laying it down and laying my block right along the edge. I know, Maggie, hush. She wants to be in on it. So what I have done is align my 1 inch strip with my block. And then I'm going to take my 2 inch that I have pressed together and lay that on top of my block. So what I have in my layer is my 1 inch single, my block, and my doubled 1 inch. And I'm going to take this to my machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam through all of it. Okay, I have sewn my 1/4 inch seam, and I am now going to press my 1 inch piece of sashing nice and open against that seam line. I want no little folds in there. There we go. I will take my next block, make sure I have it the right direction, facing down, so I'm looking at the back of it, and I'm going to line up my 1-inch piece of sashing with the raw edge of that second block. I'm looking at the finished side of the first block, and I will seam 1/4 inch, seaming together the 1-inch piece of sashing to my second block. So when I look at my sandwich, I am looking at the good side and the good side, whichever way I turn it. And I'm going to seam 1/4 inch along the 1-inch piece of sashing. All right, I have seamed my second block to the 1-inch piece of sashing, and what I have now is my 2 blocks abutting each other. And what I'm going to do now is bring the doubled piece of sashing over onto the next block, and that will conceal all raw edges, and I have no raw edges on the back either. So that will finish my sashing for these 2 blocks. So what I'm going to do is press this over just to help me keep everything nice and in place. And I will seam along the edge of this loose side. I'm then going to match that on the other side because we want it to balance, but that is not critical. That's entirely up to you. So that is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and try to very neatly sew along that outer edge. Okay, I have joined my 2. I have top stitched my sashing on the top side. I elected to go on both sides. Again, that's up to you. But they are now together, and I'm ready to move on to block 3. Block 3 would be done exactly the same way. And so it's really a fairly simple little project and is a nice way of joining any Quilt as you go project that you might have.